This is going to demonstrate how to paint trees in the mist. And like my reference photo here, I haven't done much drawing at all. I just did an outline where those mountains are going to cut into the picture. A few little treetops, just kind of to remind myself, because all the drawing is going to be done with a brush. And I just wanted to get a few marks that help me visualize where I'm going with this. 200-pound paper, rag paper, which means it's made from cotton. I've just taped it down to a plastic panel, and I wanted the whole thing to be wet, pretty good and wet. You can wet it with any kind of a brush. This is a 2-inch watercolor brush, but you don't need that. I'm going to work with a 1-inch brush. This is going to be a combination of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, real tried and true staples in my palette, because they mix a nice gray and a wide variety of grays, and it'll just suit this picture perfectly. I don't want it too dark, but I'm going on wet paper, so you can see it's going to spread. But it's a fairly dry brush. You notice there wasn't a lot of water in that mix on the palette. So these strokes will hold up, and they won't fill in all my white. I needed to leave a bit of white paper so that the whitest part of the mist, and even into the sky, has a nice range of values. As soon as the whites are gone, everything looks kind of dull and overworked. And I got to think of how I'm going to work around the mist here. I've dried the brush a little bit, and I'm just going to sort of pull down pigment into the white area. Should have maybe a few strokes going up. Just want it to fade nicely. Leave the lightest part toward the center. I'll get dark near the bottom, near the edges, just sort of underpainting. Thinking in terms of the mist having various values. It's not all pure white. We think of it as white, but when you look carefully, you see it has different thicknesses and quite a range of gray values. And I'm going to have a lot of dark in the foreground. I've added just a little bit of raw sienna into that burnt sienna mix. That'll go just slightly greener, and I can afford the green down here because of the trees that are going to be showing in the foreground. Have a bit more of their actual color visible. Yeah, just kind of getting some ideas. I really need to clean the edges at this stage because the paper is starting to dry and it becomes very absorbent, and it'll pull in the puddles off the edges and create little blossoms. I just want to tilt the page a bit to make sure that it's even. I don't want any puddles collecting as it dries. Let me just use a hair blower to speed that up. Now that it is dry, I just want to go in and start picking out little bits of treetops that are just kind of sticking out of the mist. This is about a number 3 brush, synthetic brush. All my brushes are synthetic. except maybe a couple of the blended ones that are synthetic and some natural hair, just to make them more absorbent, hold more wash. But this is just a synthetic round for just this, finding little opportunities here to pull a few trees, even very faint ones like these. Requires a little bit of patience to just figure out a good spot for them. Just going back to your reference every once in a while. As the brush dries, notice I kind of sweep it out, that you can get it to blend. It's a good thing to kind of practice. You can feel the brush emptying out, and then you can just sweep it almost like a pastel would blend on dry paper. It's an alternative to cleaning the brush in water and using the damp edge to blend it. It's a good thing to practice these little different techniques. The whole idea here is we're going to have all of these little groves or groups of trees, sharp as the tops peek out of the mist, and fading as they go down into the low-lying fog. A little bigger brush now because I'm getting closer. The trees are getting closer and need to be a bit bigger, giving some perspective. But the same technique. Paint the tops and then kind of sweep in the bottom edges as they fade into the mist. They're all going to be slightly different values too. You don't have to, just because they're getting closer doesn't mean they all get darker. Some of them are going to have more mist in front of them. Except when they're really close, like the ones at the bottom will be right clear out of the mist. Here's another technique I just thought I'd show you. I'm just dampening the paper very gently, not enough to move the paint that's down there, but just enough to blur the edges of this tree that's going in on top. And it'll just give the look of mist that's covering some of the closer ones. Just gets rid of that hard edge. So we now have a nice variety of edges. Some of the treetops will be pretty hard edge. Most of them probably will. But this is just another way of doing it. Now the darkest of the trees will be in this foreground. And I've just used burnt sienna, a little bit of phthalo green. You can use burnt sienna and phthalo blue as well, or just increase the raw sienna with your with any of your blues actually, because we're not getting a real pure bright green here. We want this forest color, but it's also been subdued by the mist, so there won't be any bright color on a day like this. You want to make sure that you get some variety into the shape. It's so tempting to just put a little army of trees all the same shape, so I try to mix in some skinny ones, put in a couple of skinny ones here and there, and then some with a bit of break in the branches where you could see the trunk. Just anything you can think of, and go back to your reference for ideas on how to get variation into the trees. Because if they look too much like a Christmas tree farm, it makes the painting really contrived. There's even some space in between the clear ones where the mist kind of rolls in and around the trunks. I just keep changing the brush size depending on how big the tree I plan to paint is, how much wash do I want it to hold. The biggest problem here is just figuring out where you want the next little group and how to overlap them. And I'm just making this up as I go, getting ideas from my photo, but it's kind of fun. It's a bit, in a sense, it's like working in oil or acrylic. You can decide as you go. You don't have to pre-commit. Now, you're going to get some edges that aren't quite soft enough, so I've taken a cut-off oil painting brush here with just clean water on it. It's cut off so that it's stiff and scrubs. You literally lift pigment right off the paper. So I've got my just a little too dark in the dark trees in the front, so I wanted to poke a bit of light into it and give you an idea how to do that subject matter.